but like that's what the alpha male is
Yeah.
like. You're supposed to be this like womanizer who's smooth and like, able to physically dominate anybody and kick anyone's ass. And if you're not that, you're weak. And like they also portray like a lot of times like the weak male in those storylines. And a lot of times they portray them as like the good guys.
Yes.
But like I remember growing up, it's like I don't want to be that guy. I want to be James Bond.
Yeah, he's a loser.
Right. And then it's all fake. Like it's a script that they're reading off.
Yeah.
No one is that smooth with the way they talk.
No.
Maybe some people. I wish, but like no one is that smooth.
Yeah.
Like it's lines out of a movie. These are actors. This is all made up.
Yeah.
Like, and that's hard to realize because it's and as like time progresses, it gets more and more real.
Yeah.
Welcome to Are We Happy Yet? Where we're all about having the tough, thought-provoking conversations about what it really takes to live a fulfilling life, without buying into the latest wellness trends, miracle cures, or life hacks.
If you're someone who's curious and likes to dig beneath the surface, join us. We're here to explore why, despite having access to more information and technology than ever, studies show that global unhappiness is at a record high.
This question kept nagging at us. Why are so many of us feeling more anxious, disconnected, and lonely than ever before?
I'm Hannah Buzzo, licensed therapist.
And I'm Jane Thatcher Hahn, licensed clinical social worker.
Together, we'll challenge the quick fix advice culture and dive into the big questions about happiness, success, and well-being.
In each episode, we'll share candid conversations and personal stories, unpacking the cultural narratives that shape how we live, love, and work. No solutions, no formulas. Just honest, thought-provoking dialogue that invites you to think differently about the world around you and your place within it.
So whether you're feeling overwhelmed by the pressure to have it all figured out, or simply curious about what lies beyond the mainstream wellness conversation, you're in the right place.
Welcome to the club. You're not alone in wondering what will finally, truly make us happy.
So today we have Dylan Stein, and he is on the care team and is the community outreach coordinator at Building Hope, which is a nonprofit that you and I work closely with. And so we've gotten the pleasure and privilege to work with Dylan, for like a year now already?
Yeah, I've actually been working for Building Hope for 2 years in like a couple weeks.
Wow.
So, yeah, time flies.
Time does fly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking a lot, Jane, about, we have a lot of women on this show, and we're women, and we kind of want to know how the men are doing.
Very true.
And there have been some trends in culture around masculinity and men and power and all these pieces. So we have Dylan Stein here to talk to us all about what his experience of masculinity is. He has a really cool story in his own personal journey. So I know today will be a really, really fun episode.
This is good. This is good for us. Getting all the perspectives, trying to understand men, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, Dylan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. For some backstory, when I started my private practice in 2019 in Summit County, it was like Building Hope that made it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like they sent me clients and they connected me with the community, and they built so much community up here in Summit County. So for our practices, Building Hope is not only an amazing organization, but it's been so integral to growing our businesses. So we love Building Hope. We're super happy to be talking to you and hearing about your experiences.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I think I'm going to talk about Building Hope a little bit later, but that's something I've realized more and more, like how much Building Hope supports like providers, as well as the community and patients and people who are seeking mental health. It's also trying to make it easier for providers to provide the care. So that's great to hear, Jane.
Yeah, they're doing a good job. Yeah.
So Dylan, why don't we come to you and you can kind of just tell us your story, like mountain man story. And then we can start there because I know it's a pretty interesting one.
Yeah. I guess I'll just start like right from the beginning. I was born and raised in Seattle. Loved growing up there. That's kind of probably like where my love for the outdoors and mountains really came from, was growing up in the Northwest. I went to school in college in Oregon. And then after that, I went up to Portland and just kind of worked a typical 9 to 5, like very stereotypical, like in literally a cubicle for at least part of it, a gray cubicle. And then COVID hit, and I think that kind of like changed the way a lot of people thought about their lives, and like it really, I think, forced a lot of us to like step back and take like a bird's eye view of like what we were doing, and if it was like what we really wanted to do. And I did the same thing, and sitting in a cubicle with a mask on in gray Portland, or either smoky Portland. We had like really bad wildfires, and I remember thinking with like all that with COVID and everything, I was like, I feel like this is like very dramatic, but I was like, I feel like the world's like ending. And I don't know, like I was really uncertain about like the future of everything, honestly, at that point. And I always knew that there was like something missing. And I knew I loved to ski. I knew I loved to be outside. And so I remember my dad, way back in the day, he used to live in Aspen, and he would like tell me stories about Colorado and how it's way better snow out in Colorado than it was in Washington. And then I remember I called him one day in like the dead of winter in dark Portland, and I told him my idea that I was going to quit my job. I was going to live out of my truck for a summer and like work on farms, and then move to Breckenridge. And then it was like the pause. I was like, oh my God, like, okay, is he gonna like be okay or like approve of this? And both my parents were like, yes, like do this. This is the perfect time to do it. And like, you know, you just do it. I actually watched Into the Wild. That's what like set me over the edge.
Love
and
that.
I was like,
love this
yes.
whole story.
Yeah, it's very on brand.
It's very on brand for Summit County now.
Totally.
Yes.
And so the day before my 25th birthday, I quit my job. And then a couple days after my 25th birthday, which I say that because it's like a quarter life. I see things like, all right,
sure.
now next. I packed up my truck and I spent the next 4 months living out of my truck, traveled all around the West. I did, if you guys are familiar with workaway or woofing, it's basically like you work on farms or house like keeping or whatever in exchange for like free room and board and food. And like you work like part-time, so it's like a cheap way to travel. And like I worked on like a goat farm, which was really cool. Like the experience is really cool. Like I worked on a cattle ranch in Wyoming, and then I have family out in Kauai. I went to Kauai for about a month, and I worked at a COVID vaccine clinic for like a month there. And then did just like random stuff out there. And then I came here, and all of that was like, you know, again, it was like I did it because that's what I wanted to do, and I love being outdoors. I wanted an adventure. But I think a big part of me thought that this was going to be like, this is going to fix me. Like I will be totally fine after this was the light at the end of the tunnel. My whole life I've dealt with depression. And then this year I was like formally diagnosed with persistent depressive disorder. So kind of as like just a step down from major. And it's definitely been a challenge my whole life. And so I thought that leaving this job that I didn't like, leaving this area, I love the Northwest, but an area that I was over, and, you know, moving to Summit County and skiing every day and living my dream, I thought that was going to be like it. And like doing this whole travel thing. And I remember actually telling my therapist in Portland at the time, I said, I can't believe I actually said this to him. I was like, I'm going to be fine after I do this. Like, I don't think, and he looked very, he wasn't convinced. Skeptical. And it wasn't. I quickly realized even before I got here, I was like, nope, like you can run, but you can't hide from depression and mental health. And so, it's not the whole like van life thing. That is something that I know looks really glorious, like especially on social media. Particularly on social media, but and like when I watched Into the Wild, like I know that movie has a very dark ending, but like the adventure of it looked very like alluring. And but of course that's Hollywood, and Instagram and TikTok is also, you know, not really real. And so like it was also really hard. Like living out of a truck is like not fun all the time. And I was also at this point where like I don't want to talk to anyone. I was really over people. Especially with COVID and just politics and everything. And so I was like, I just don't want to like be around anyone. That lasted like 10 days. And I was like, I can't I haven't talked to anyone in like 10 days.
Yeah.
And so I really like got super lonely. And so it was incredible. I've no regrets. I'm so glad that I did it. But for anyone who's thinking about doing something like that, like, I think it's important to go in with a really realistic view. I was literally like fantasizing about it during my job in my cubicle. And like, I think that set me up to be disappointed in a lot of things, because it is incredible. Like, if you are young and like want to do it, like, definitely do it. But just be super realistic with your expectations about it. It's going to suck sometimes. But that's also like, I was kind of glad that it's just real. And I learned a lot through doing that. So once I got here, you know, I kept pushing it out. I was like, well, once I get to like Breckenridge and like, then I'll be like totally fine. Cause then I'll be skiing. No, same shit. I was, super lonely here. And I broke my collarbone like right when I moved out here. So skiing was not a thing anymore for the next couple months. I didn't know anybody. And I think the worst part was that I had like reached it and it didn't change anything. And I was like, oh shit, like, now what do I do? There's nothing out there that I can like, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I've reached the end and there's just like way more tunnel. And I think another thing I experienced here was like, if this doesn't make me happy, like looking outside and seeing mountains and skiing, like, I'm just hopeless. And it's the same thing. Like, that's not to say I love living here. I'm going to be here for a long time. And I implore whoever, you know, if you're interested in mountain life, to do it. But again, like, have real expectations about what it's going to be like, and be prepared for it to be super lonely to start off with. Because now I have a really good community here. But it took a long time, especially up here. It's cliquey, and it can be hard to break into groups, and like, just like, be prepared for that. I always tell people, like, it's a realistic fairy tale. It is a fairy tale. Like, I still like pinch myself all the time living here. I'm like, I cannot believe this. And then other days I'm like, nope, like, I'm super depressed. Like, this is just like anywhere else in the world, except now I feel like extra guilt because I like have this great, you know, situation here in the mountains, and I still feel that way.
So, I have clients say to me that they'll say, like, I'm in one of the most beautiful places in the world, and it makes it worse. And that's not true. I know for everybody or all the time. Sometimes the nature really supports people's mental health, but sometimes because of the expectations and because you know that so many people wish they were in this beautiful place, you do get the guilt piece, or I should be feeling a certain way, or so I hope, obviously, you know, you're not alone in that sort of experience.
I assume so. I was like, I can't be the only one. And that's one of the things, like, as therapy, like, when I was back in Portland, I had some, the reason I went to therapy initially in Portland was because I was dealing with some substance use issues around alcohol, and a breakup that I was self-medicating alcohol with. And that's kind of what was like, all right, I need to talk to somebody. And one of the things that I love about therapy is that it like makes you realize you're not as crazy as you thought. Like, I would say stuff to him and like expect him to like, I was like, wait for the reaction. And he's like, and like, okay. And so it was super like reassuring. Like, I was like, okay, like, I'm not this horrible person that I thought I was, or like this crazy person that I thought I was. Like, what I'm feeling is just very human, honestly. And so, like, you know, back to your point, like, I do try to remind myself that I'm not the only one who's going through this stuff. And now that I'm like involved in the field, I definitely know that. You know, I see that all the time. And that does, you know, it just makes you feel a lot less alone in the whole thing. And that you're not going crazy. That's kind of like how I got here. How I started, when I first moved here, I started working at Patagonia just to get like my kind of feet on the ground here, which is a great job. But I quickly kind of got tired of retail, and I wanted just something new. And I talked to, there's a local woman here, Carol Craig, who is like kind of my mentor here. And I was interested in getting involved in events, and I established a relationship with her and just kind of meeting with her. And then one day I was having a super bad mental health day, And I met with her, and she told me about Building Hope. And I think the universe kind of, that happened for a reason. And she was like, I don't know if like you're really into that kind of stuff, because you never know, like talking to a guy, especially, like, are you really into that? And I was like, no, yeah, awesome. Like that sounds super cool. And, it's been working for them has been incredible. And I'm so incredibly grateful that the role I get to play, like I always dreamed about living in a mountain town. I thought I was just going to be skiing here. Yeah. But I get to play like this role where I'm trying to helping improve the mental health of a mountain town. And like, that's, in my wildest dreams, like I said, that's the fairy tale part of it. Like, I'm so grateful for that opportunity that I get to play, or the role I get to play in this community. So that kind of brings us to, and then I start my grad program to become a counselor next Tuesday. So so that kind of brings you, so that's brings us to now. So to
this moment.
Yeah.
Well, I know you guys have talked a lot about sort of masculinity and masculinity within the mental health world and all of those things. Anything particular come up from your conversation, or any insights you have for us around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like in general, and this is what I also told you, Hannah, like I can only speak for myself, and I don't know like as a whole how men are doing. But I will say that I think like I'm super optimistic on where that is going with all mental health, but particularly with men. Of course, I live in kind of bubbles where I grew up and here. However, I think that like it's in going in the right path, and with things like this country is so divided. But I will say men on both sides of the political cultural aisle seem to both agree that like this is a problem. Like men's mental health is like a problem, and there's no shame in talking about it. Generally speaking, I think there's like consensus there with everyone in the country, which is pretty damn rare.
To get some consensus going.
Exactly.
That's my question, right? Like, okay, we know it's a problem, but you even said it when you were talking about your experience working with Building Hope. It's weird for a man to be interested in mental health. So like we all acknowledge this problem. The statistics back it up, right? And yet there's this social norm, I don't know what to call it, that like men aren't into that. Could you speak to your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just like, I don't really know what to call it either, but like societal pressure, I think is the best way. That runs really fucking deep. Like really, really deep. And I'll use myself as an example. Even now, I had a moment a couple months ago where I was kind of teetering on the edge of crisis. And I remember one night I wanted to call my mom. And this is the meanest thing I think I've ever said to myself out loud. I said, "Oh, what are you going to do? You're going to be a pussy and you're going to call your mom?" I said that out loud to myself. And like, that's how deep it runs. Like, even, I'm not saying that like I am, know everything about mental health and an expert and like a champion, but like, I'm more involved in it, and I run a men's group, and I'm going to be a counselor, and like still for me, it still hits me. And so like, that goes to show like it'll hit, I think all men suffer from, and I think that's the right word, suffer from that societal pressure to like man up and not deal with it, and like don't be a pussy, that kind of shit.
Which then the language is so interesting, because that also refers obviously to a part of a woman's body, and totally. So like there's so many layers to that, right? Like don't be feminine, don't be feminine, don't be all of these pieces, because that's bad, that's not manly, that's not good.
Totally. And so it just like, it runs really deep, and even though the conversation's going the right way, like those roots are strong, and it's going to be really hard to change that. I think also that kind of is a good segue into like this resurgence of like hypermasculinity that I think we're seeing.
Can you like say what your definition is for that?
Hypermasculinity? Maybe that's a really good question. I think it's
well, you told me when we got coffee, it's Andrew Tate.
Yeah, I mean that's totally. That's
we
what
could just name a few names who are in the news today, right? Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I want to like, before I get too deep into it,
Yeah.
I do want to say though that like I think it is helpful for some men to express their masculinity in a traditional masculine way, big air quotes around that, in ways that are healthy.
Which is what?
Like I like to work on my car sometimes, or like lift weights, or like hang out with the boys.
Okay.
You know, like that. I think in a way like that makes me feel more masculine. And what I'm trying to get at is it's like it's different for everyone. There's also a lot of like feminine, more feminine things that I do that I also feel are part of my masculinity. So like if you want to go out there and embrace being a big, strong man, I think that's okay. However, I think when you get into this like hyper masculinity, it could very easily slip into misogyny. Yeah. Because if you're saying, let's go back to traditional like masculinity, that kind of makes me think you want to go back. And if you look back, we lived in like a place of where misogyny was a much more accepted thing, and much more ripe, and common than it is. I mean, I don't want to say it certainly still exists now, but it was different, much worse back then. And so I think you have to be really careful. Again, I am totally for anyone doing anything they want unless it hurts or harms someone else. And I think that hypermasculinity can harm other people.
So where does it get like dangerous or toxic? So like I like to hang out with the boys and play golf and work on your car. Like in your own experience with other men, like where does it cross the line?
That's a great question.
You're asking the good questions.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah, that's the second it's a great question you've gotten.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say like the cop-out answer is like, you know it when you see it, but that's really not the case because a lot of guys don't.
I don't think they know.
No. That's a really good question. And I think it's when the speech starts to become, well, one of the things that like really bothers me with hypermasculinity is that a lot of times the influencers see who are doing it, they're like shaming other people who are not following this strict regime of what it means to be a man. And so I think once it becomes dangerous is when you like it, people put it in that box. Yeah. Like this is what it means to be a man, and all this other stuff is stupid, and like it's feminine or weak, and like this is what like you see influencers, they use like men have to be this way. I think that's when it gets dangerous, because masculinity is different for everyone, which is why I said if you want to go work on your car and like embrace that and that makes you feel more empowered, that's great. If you want to, I don't know what would be the opposite of that, like paint or cook, or I don't know,
paint, cook, right,
whatever it might be,
get your nails done.
So exactly, like that's, if that makes you feel like masculine, great. But like it doesn't have, it's not like one or the other.
Yeah, my thing with it too is like, I mean, speak to this, but from a woman's perspective, and I work with a lot of couples, so I can speak to myself as a therapist, but also what I see in couples is like women are like, I want you to be vulnerable and open and share your feelings, but then like when the men do let the masculinity down, like we get freaked out and we're like, ooh, like not that, right? And so I think it's kind of a setup for men too of like, hey, you have to be in this role, but I want you to be open and vulnerable with me, but then like it's too much for me, right? It's
a fine line to walk for sure. And I've definitely talked to men and experienced this myself where like I opened up and was vulnerable, and at least my interpretation was that it backfired on me.
With other men or with women or
women,
both?
With women.
Yeah.
What, they get freaked out?
And that this is my speculation. I can't get inside the head of somebody, but I don't think it was a coincidence that the relationship ended shortly thereafter. And I haven't really felt, I'm trying to think if I felt that with men. I think I'm sure I have, but relationships, like the end of a relationship hits you so hard.
Yeah.
And it's so devastating that I think that's why it can be very devastating. That's why it like sticks in my head more. So yeah, I mean, I think I've experienced, I think men at large are kind of afraid of that. So it's definitely like a fine, the the societal pressures, like I said, it runs deep in everybody. I think it's both genders.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we're all complicit in some degree and all need to think about our role. And I do talk about this with my female clients because what we're socialized to want and find desirable, I think, is a really strong masculine man who can take care of us and tend to a lot of our emotional needs because we're trained to be emotional and also to tune into everybody's emotions constantly. But then the vulnerability piece can, for some women, like they can't reconcile all those pieces, right? To what you're saying. Like they want you to show up for all their emotions, but don't want to step in when you have an emotion or a need or a softness or a weakness or a flaw. Is that kind of what you're saying? And I'm certainly not pinning any of the blame on either, you know, trying not to pin blame here, but I just know to this piece, right? Like we could all do better to say everybody gets to be emotional and vulnerable and strong and soft and a more complete whole person. And I actually think that would be better for our heterosexual relationships, that we are allowed to have more freedom of expression around masculinity and femininity. And I think the queer community is light years ahead of us, ahead of the heterosexual community in this, because there has just been so much more exploration about what's a man, what's a woman, what's, you know, what is a non-binary person. They're just, you know, they're exploring more.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also like at the end of the day, people also have certain wants out of a relationship. And so if like there's a woman that wants a more like traditionally masculine man, like I do agree with you, if we maybe were able to let, you know, maybe men or just like have that balance of like vulnerability be a little bit more balanced, it would be better. But also like people do have preferences and I respect that. And I also have preferences and I am a very like emotional sensitive person. And like, I'm going to need that from a partner. Like I'm going to need you to also support me. I'll support you for sure. But you know, that's just my needs. I need that. And so one of the things that like, at least, you know, if that is why some of my relationships ended, then okay. You know, that person wasn't going to be able to give that to me. And in a way, that was them being honest with me that they, and you know, it's also a lot like someone might not be ready for that. I get that. Like, especially for a man to be that way. I totally understand. Like maybe they're also trying to work on themselves and they don't have the capacity to try to help someone else. So, you know, I respect that people also have like their desires and wishes and needs in a relationship. Hannah, one thing I wanted to say, just kind of backtracking a little bit about your question when hypermasculinity goes too far.
Because it was so good.
We're just going to keep circling back around your question.
That's just the nucleus of the conversation now. I think a pretty obvious line that it crosses is when it promotes violence.
Yeah.
I think that's like the most obvious and like tangible. I think it's great for all people to like know how to defend themselves. I think that's a good skill to have if you'd like to have that skill. But with like these influencers like pushing hypermasculinity, they have to know that they're like saying like it can be influenced or it can be seen as like I have to be able to like beat the shit out of anybody to be a man. They might not be like overtly saying that.
That's like the message underneath of it.
Yeah.
It's like aggression and
totally. Yeah. And they might like cloak it and it's all self-defense and it's just, but I think it's pretty like there's a line there where some people are just like promoting self-defense and some people are promoting like violence. And if like, you know, you have to be able to dominate another man, like that is super dangerous. And I also do believe that men are kind of more predisposed to violence because of these societal norms. I also think there's some biological things just with like testosterone. And like that's like kind of playing with fire in my opinion, especially with like younger guys. And a lot of like guys don't know their own strength too. And I mean like and it's funny, like I used to be really ashamed of the fact that I've never been in a fist fight. Like, and thinking of it now, well, actually, honestly, it still gives me some shame sometimes, just to be totally like candid with you. But still, I'm like, no, thank God.
What is the shame? Like, what's the shame piece?
That I'm like not a tough guy. That like I didn't, I think that's just it. That like I'm not this big tough guy. Like I don't want to fight somebody because I'll be honest, that sounds fucking scary.
Yeah.
First of all,
and you're not supposed to be scared. You're supposed to just be ready for battle.
Yeah, you're supposed to be a warrior.
Yeah.
And also like I don't want to kill somebody accidentally. I don't want to be killed. Like that happens all the time. And so like that's why it's like playing with fire. Like you're pushing some of these men to like potentially ruin their lives. And like violence just it doesn't have a place. Like it sometimes, unfortunately, I do believe is necessary to defend yourself. But violence for the sake of violence does not have a place in the world. And like this whole like people use the argument like, well, men used to go to war and storm the beaches of Normandy. I was like, yeah, thank fucking God we don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
It's called progress. Like we're not in a world that we have to do that as much, hopefully. And so like, why do you want to go back to that? Like,
well, and it feels like, and this may be using this conversation as my personal therapy session, but it almost is starting to feel like, okay, so like maybe the overt physical violence, like we don't do anymore, but like what I feel as a woman, and I don't want to get super one-sided, is like, okay, it's not physical violence, but now it feels like sexual violence and sexual aggression, and like that's kind of okay, and like it's fine, and was it consent, and women want money, like it's almost like kind of changing flavors to now like it's like more like sexual in nature.
I think it's always been, I think that sexual violence has always existed.
Yeah,
I think it's not different, except maybe we're talking about it differently.
I'm saying like, okay, physical violence feels like it's not okay, but sexual violence like still feels like it is.
Like in the world of what we're saying is masculine and what's okay and what's not, we might say to a man like, it's not okay to like get into constant fist fights, but it's probably still okay to take advantage of women.
Go get drunk and like go home and like,
Yeah, no, and that's I think that's another line that it crosses. That hyper masculinity can cross because a lot of men base their worth. I'm also guilty of this. Of like, how many women can you sleep with? Or like, how successful are you romantically? And like, there's nothing wrong with consensual, sexual relations. But like, if you push that narrative, then I think men are going to start to get like desperate, and then they're going to do desperate, horrible things to make them feel more masculine or like a man. I also think like there's the whole thing of like men are supposed to be the aggressor. That just sounds fucking scary just saying that out loud. Like, I don't want to be an aggressor.
In the bedroom, you mean? Like, that's the concept. Like,
or like you're supposed to make the first move.
Yeah.
And like you look at like Hollywood, it's the same shit. Like, a lot of these guys in like movies, they're getting turned down and they just keep trying. And I think, there's a place for persistence in a relationship, I think for both genders. But like in a gentle way to like show your interest, but not in like this, forceful, physical way. And I think that like, and I'm really glad like this conversation is going the way it is like sexual assault is also like much more nuanced than just like your stereotypical like thought of like rape, of like a violent rape. It's like much more complex than that. And like the like concept of consent, and like if you get 10 no's and then 1 yes, I would say that's still sexual assault. Because you wore that, you just kind of like pressured that person into it. I saw this like podcast or a clip of a guy where he was just like kind of speaking into the camera to men. He's like, men, be really honest. Like, have you ever pressured her into doing it?
Yeah.
Have you ever convinced? That was what he said, convinced. I was like, oh shit. Like, a lot of guys do that. And like,
oh yeah. Like
that is like creepy as hell. And like, also like there wasn't consent there. If you had to convince somebody to, and Hannah, you talked about like, do guys feel like kind of threatened now because like there's the Me Too movement, and I gotta be frank, like it's pretty fucking simple to me.
Yeah.
Don't sexually assault someone. Like if they say no, then no. That's it. Even if they're like joking, I'm just like, no, I'm gonna take that serious. Like,
there's something about like the culture though you're married, so you may not know this, but
I've been out of circulation for a long time, so I don't know what's going on out there.
Like about like, it's like, I don't know. I'll just speak for myself. Like, weak to ask for consent. I remember I was like dating this guy for a while, and every time we would have sex, he would like ask for consent, and it was like 7 years ago. But I like thought that was weird, and it's like no, like the fact that I think it's weird, I know is so ingrained. Just like to think of you calling your mom is weird, but like how does that play out subconsciously is what I always think about, right?
Yeah.
Like I can't be the only one.
No, you're totally right. Like I don't want to just stop. That does kind of like kill the mood. I'll be like totally honest with 100%. You. And like it can be complicated.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like if you're a decent human being, you'll know when it has gone too far or when someone's uncomfortable. And there's maybe a way to ask.
Yeah.
Like, or like far beforehand, before you're in the act too, and just being like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And like, or like establishing like, before you get physical, being like, you like, please tell me.
Yeah.
If there's like, for me, like I always tell like anyone I'm with, like I am not comfortable and not having a good time or like aroused if you are not comfortable. So like, please tell me that for both of our sakes. Like I don't want to like let's just be like just establishing that narrative. I think where it gets complicated is like in the bar scene. Yeah. When you're 100%. Like, when you're just like, it's like a one night stand. And then there's the whole conversation of like, are either people really consenting when they're wasted? Yeah. Like I think I had times in college where I wasn't able to consent, but like I still did consent. Like, so it's I shouldn't say that it's as simple as I put it there, but I do think you know it when you've gone too far. Especially as a man, I think that, I understand why some men might be a little like hesitant, but really if like you're that hesitant, just ask. Like if you're that scared, just ask. And I think some things are really fucking easy and clear. Yeah. Like right now, sure. Neil Gaiman is in the news for multiple sexual assaults. He's an author, right? Like getting into the bathtub, stripping all of his clothes off, getting into the bathtub with the nanny. Like I wasn't there. It seems pretty cut and dry. She didn't invite you in. Yeah. You don't have a previous relationship. You're married. She works for you. Like that doesn't seem hard to me. Yeah. That seems easy. I understand what you're saying, Hannah. And we met with a sex therapist in the community and interviewed her on the podcast. And like we can all acknowledge that we have sexual fantasies and sexual desires and things that make us feel excited and things that make us feel turned off. And I don't think we necessarily need to have shame or blame around those things, but some of those things are trained into us. Yeah. And one of the fantasies is somebody comes and takes me, or I take somebody and we go for it, right? And I think it could go either way, either gender, but a common one is like, I get swept off my feet by a man, right? And so I think what you're describing is, well, sometimes I kind of want you to take a little bit of control and go for it. Is that what you're saying? Or like the consent was sort of killed the mood that when he asked every time. Yeah, when he asked every time, it's just like, okay, loser. Like, because we're not we're programmed just as much as men are that like men are the aggressor and they want to fuck you and like they want to dominate you. And so when like every time we asked, it was like, you're a pussy, right? Like I'm just being like honest, 100%. Right? Like I think that complexity is really important to talk about because first of all, I think that feeling or experience can be created with lots of conversation. 100%. Right? And like... And I mean, I was 23. And right. Like, so... we were like... I was not, I mean, like... Fair enough. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think like conversations can be had about that. Yeah. Like, I'd like to experience you this way. But like, don't do it on the first date, maybe. Yeah. Or have a conversation or make sure the first time like, I think there's more and deeper conversations we could all be having about this and naming of our own, like, well, I was socialized for you to interact with me this way. Like you're a man, so you should be treating me this way. And then when you don't, I'm feeling a little shocked and off kilter because that's how I'm socialized. So really it's like, if men and women can be in a conversation together about it like this, that seems useful to me. And I think it goes back to what you said, Dylan. It's like, I think part of it now that we're talking is clicking is like,
men aren't supposed to be scared, right? So to like bring a conversation up to them and like ask them how they're feeling and seeing if they're scared, like that's like not what we do, right? So I think it kind of even is that gender norm or that social norm of like men don't have feelings, they're strong, they you know,
they just know what to do.
Like,
they're confident. But I think, like, you know, and I'm just learning a lot from just listening to you guys.
We ain't got nothing good to say.
I disagree. I think, like, I guess, like, I'll backtrack a little bit of what I said. Like, it isn't as simple as I think I put it. I think it's simple for, like, what you were just talking about, that author. And, like, if you think, like, the word assault, that is very simple. But, like, these, like, more nuanced, like, power dynamics where something, like, was just skirted the line, that is very complex, for sure. And that can be difficult to navigate, definitely.
You're right on, because I think part of it, too, like, my parents are extremely MAGA, and so anytime something comes up with, like, a woman accusing like, you know, she asked for it, whatever. So I don't need to get into that. But what I'm saying is, because what you just made me think of is like, oh, we don't like complex things. We like things to be black and white, yes and no, this is that. So if it's complex, if it's like, oh, this happened, it's not so black and white, like we have an aversion to that as humans. So I think that's part of it too.
Totally. You want to be like, and I felt it when I said that originally, just like, it's simple, guys. Like, you want to be like, it's come on, it's simple. But it can be, but it also can be very complex, which is like, and I think I told you when we met up the other day, like, I'm trying to say and more than but, because two things can be, you know, true at the same time. But yeah, like that's the case of being, there's a lot of comfort in just being very like, it's just this and this. I actually, with my own therapist, he told me to live in the gray a little bit more, because I tend to like either fantasize that something's going to be way better, or I always fuck up this word, catastrophize. Yes. I don't know. I know the word. I just like can't say it.
I think we got exactly the meaning.
Cool. All right. And it's like either that or that. It's either going to be great or I'm going to fucking die. Like, like that's it. And so like, if you look at like the data in my life, it's usually somewhere, usually more on the better side. And it always falls in there. Because like, that's the way like reality works. It's just like, it's not as crazy as you think it's going to be in your head. And I think like that's been exacerbated by Hollywood and media. And I think like that's another thing that guys feel. Like I was telling you, I think most boys grew up watching James Bond. You know, everyone grew up watching James Bond, honestly. And like that's what this like the alpha man is portrayed as. I also fucking hate that word. Alpha male. I want that to be gone. Like that's ridiculous. We're not packs of wolves. We're human beings.
Well,
anyway.
Speak for yourself.
Right.
Are you in a pack?
Sometimes I'm like, I have some wolf energy. You know what I mean? We just had a full wolf moon, and I was like, I want to like get out there and do some howling.
You're like barking.
I was like, oh,
Nothing wrong with that. I love that. I'm definitely pro howling.
Okay, great.
100%.
And we can howl without an alpha.
Yes.
I don't need an alpha male to howl. Exactly. So
but like that's what the alpha male is like. You're supposed to be this like womanizer who's smooth and like, you know, able to physically dominate anybody and kick anyone's ass. And if you're not that, you're weak. And like they also portray like a lot of times like the weak male in those storylines. And a lot of times they portray them as like the good guys.
Yes.
But like I remember growing up, it's like I don't want to be that guy. I want to be James Bond.
Yeah, he's a loser.
Right.
And then it's all fake. Like it's a script that they're reading off. No one is that smooth with the way they talk.
No.
Maybe some people. I wish, but like no one is that smooth. Like it's lines out of a movie. These are actors. This is all made up. Like, and that's hard to realize because it's and as like time progresses, it gets more and more real.
Hi,
Hi, Hannah here, interrupting this amazing episode with a quick announcement. I'm so excited to be facilitating a robust, impactful couples psychedelic therapy retreat this March 13th through 16th in the mountains of beautiful Colorado. Join us for an intentional long weekend that includes therapist-led workshops, refreshing downtime in a beautiful home, guided private couples psychedelic sessions, and larger group psychedelic journeys using various psychedelic medicines, and more. If one of your goals this year is to deepen your relationship, reconnect with your partner, or invite new passion and intimacy into your partnership, this retreat is for you. Check the show notes out for more information about the retreat.
I love that you're talking about, the black and white thinking and living in the gray, and you're getting into the field, so you're about to tell that to like people for the rest of your life, to tell all your clients.
And then when you are like a black and white yourself, you're like, oh fuck.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Yeah.
Then you'll be like, oh my God, I just talked about this all day. But I think that male, female, masculine, feminine are very black and white concepts too.
Yes.
And I think that America, and maybe, part of it is that we're sorting creatures. Our brains and our survival instincts need to sort things and put them in boxes and want some certainty and some surety, right? So part of that is just our biology and the way that we're hardwired. And life gets easier when you can look at things from a more gray lens and less black and white. 100%. But I think people are scared right now, and I think that people are overwhelmed with information. So they are either Trump or not Trump, Republican or Democrat, male or female, gay or straight, this or that, blah, 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 blah. And I think it gets really confusing because you're like, wait, so I'm a woman, but I have a lot of traits that to me feel masculine. So sorting all of that out has been part of my journey. So I think when we're using the words masculine and feminine, first of all, they probably mean something different to everybody. And second of all, there's a lot of ways to be masculine, a lot of ways to be feminine. Every woman has traits that are typically assigned to men and vice versa. And then there's plenty of people that are non-binary, or somewhere else on that spectrum. So I just appreciate the reflection about that.
Yeah. And that, like the word masculine and feminine, like one of the words, and I guess we're going to talk about the men's group here in a second, but like one of the things I want to do in that group is like, does it mean to be a man?
Yeah.
And, I honestly have come to think that those are pretty fluid terms, almost arbitrary in a way. I was having a really interesting conversation with my mom last year, and I asked her, I was like, I'm trying to figure out, like in the group, like we're kind of grappling with what it means to be a man. And she asked me, like, well, wait, what do you think it means to be a man? I was like, well, you're supposed to be like the provider and courageous and brave and respectful. And I listed off a couple of those kind of things. And she was like, so like that kind of makes me think that means that's not what a woman is. So does that mean you don't prescribe those are mutually for men or exclusively for men? Sorry. And I was like, oh my God, like she wasn't like accusing me of being misogynistic, but like it is kind of misogynistic in a way, like kind of sneakily misogynistic. And I was like, I think that's just like being a good person. Yeah. And I saw, there's this podcast that I was telling you about, Hannah. It's called We Are Man Enough. And it's like, I haven't really like watched a lot of it. I honestly don't have a lot of patience to sit down and listen to an entire podcast episode sometimes.
So you better get ready.
I will. But it was a clip from a podcast, and it was they were interviewing Steve-O from Jackass.
Oh yeah.
And they asked him that question, and that's exactly what he said. He's like, I don't think I really assign like certain qualities to certain like genders. It's just being accountable and respectful and just being a good person. And we landed on that in the men's group. I believe so. I don't want to speak for all the guys, but I think we kind of were grappling with that as well. Like, I think this is just about like being a good person, and like whoever you are, you don't have to fit into like a certain peg. Like you can just be, have masculine traits and feminine traits, or maybe they're just traits.
Right.
Again, that gray.
Yeah.
And so I think what it means to be a man is what it means to be a woman in a lot of respects. It's just what it means to be a human being. So that was a big shout out to my mom
Hey, Mom.
Yeah,
hey,
thank you.
Good job.
Rate us 5 stars.
Yes, please. But I guess really quick, I do want to give my parents a shout out. One of the reasons why I am so comfortable as a man to talk about this stuff, I have to give a lot of props to my dad. My dad, I asked him for permission for all this stuff, so I got his consent to talk about this, but he also has depression. And that's something him and I talk about pretty openly. And I cannot stress enough how insanely grateful I am to have a father that I can talk to. I was going through some pretty bad times in my early 20s, and like he took the late night calls a lot. And he dealt with some like, you know, honestly like drug and alcohol induced like some ramblings. But he was there. He held the space for me. And like now, like, you know, we have conversation. We just ask each other. We have this number rating system that we always ask, like, what number are you at today? And I was talking to him last night about this, and we were about to go, and I was like, oh, I got to hear like what number you're at right now. And it's the rating from like 1 to 10, just like how it's kind of like on like how's your depression today, but how are you feeling today?
You were born to be a therapist.
Yeah. But like,
so sweet.
And our joke is that him and I are never going to get lower than a 2 and never higher than an 8. That's just the way it is. That's okay. And I told him last night, I was like, I don't even know if I want to be higher than an 8. That sounds like too happy to me. And it's like, that's a little like too optimistic, man. But big shout out to my dad and to like, I can't stress enough how insanely grateful. I don't think I'd be as near as comfortable as talking about this stuff as I would be now without like his acceptance of that. And huge shout out to all of those men who grew up in that time. Like he grew up in Kansas in 60s. Like you do not talk about that shit. Like, no. And like to see, I went to when I was back home for Christmas, I went to his like, he had this meditation and talk men's group. And they were all guys like over 50. And at the end of the group, I was like, you guys are like so inspiring to me. It's like it's courageous for anyone to talk about their mental health. And it's courageous for men now to talk about their mental health for my generation. I think it's exceptional for men of that age to really, truly, like, they were conditioned to fucking hell to not talk about this. And so shout out to my dad. I love you. And shout out to those older men who are like, you know, I think also like inspiring the younger men to speak out. And I also got to shout out my mom. She is also she's like, her and I are like carbon copies. And so she also will listen, you know, and when she hears that story about me not calling her, she's going to call me and be like, you can never, ever do that ever again.
I love that.
And she's listening to me too. When I broke my collarbone, I was like, I need to cry. Like, I need to get, like, not from the pain. It was from like the emotional, like, I moved out here to ski. Like, and that's how I'm going to make friends. And like, what do I do now? And I could feel it. And it's really hard for me to cry, but if I call her and hear her voice, like, boom. And so she'll hold space for that. And you know, you need to get that shit out sometimes. And so shout out to my whole family for being so supportive of me, and supportive of just being vulnerable and not a good woman or good man, just a good person. So
good job, Steins.
Right?
Good job, Steins.
Right?
You have we're therapists. You have our 5-star rating.
5-star rating on the parenting.
Yep.
I know we were going to jump into the men's group, but we just did an interview maybe last week or the week before with my friend Sean Ensley, who is a war veteran and been through lots of trauma and loss. And he had a really similar story about his father and their connection. And I just think that's really interesting. I think that often we just like assume we're all going to be more connected to our mothers, or that the mom is the person who's going to be nurturing and caring, and moms are invaluable. And so I guess not even mom or dad, but just having two parents or even one parent, one adult in your life who's really like, vulnerability is okay. I'm here for you. I'm not going to place a judgment on it or any sort of morality on it. I mean, that can change a person's life, right? To have one safe adult, whether it's clearly, whether it's a parent or an aunt or uncle or a teacher or whomever, but a consistent person who shows up with that messaging, I think is we have a lot of parents who are really anxious about how their kids are going to turn out. So I just want to say to you, like, in hearing all of this, like giving a lot of space for somebody to be who they are and be vulnerable, I think is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you kind of alluded to it, and I don't think there's any solutions to this, like sexy solutions. I think it's like a huge conversation. But you did start a men's group to kind of combat some of this.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about like how that was for you, what it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Jamie.
I just got to say, I can't believe you started a men's group because I've never seen it fly before in this county. So good work, because I'm always like, all of our clinicians at Grit Therapy are like, we need a men's group. We need a men's group. And I'm like, yes, I agree. And we've never been able to successfully start one, and I haven't seen it happen. And I'm like, do they all want to get together and like throw axes, or like, what do they want to, like, we'll do it. We get them together. So please tell us how you were able to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I originally thought like when I first started building up, I did events. And so I thought of this as like, I'm going to do like a men's group as like an event. And I thought about having it be like a therapy group with like a licensed clinician. And then partly because I'm lazy, and I was like, that sounds like a whole thing. But
Fair.
Also because I think I wanted this to be a space potentially for like men to like, use as a jumping off point. So like, this is their start for opening up. And then, once it's open, I think a lot of humans, will like the gates are open, and you're like, all right, that was not near as bad as I thought. Now I'm going to like pursue this. So I thought that a peer-led group probably sounded less threatening and intense than a therapy group. I just wanted to like brand it as like, this is just us getting together and talking. Like, it's not like therapy. It's nothing like that. It's just guys getting together and like having a space to just talk. I brought in, because I didn't want to do it alone, I brought in my buddy James Pearson. He's on Breck Ski Patrol. He's also about to graduate at CMC Breck in their human services program with I think an emphasis on psychology. I think he eventually wants to be a counselor as well. And so that's why I brought him in. And big shout out to James too, because him and I have some really cool conversations. It's always awesome to have a buddy like that you can just go really deep with too. But so he was kind of like naturally someone I wanted to partner with on this. And so we got together, we did like a peer training, and then we also are like QPR trained. So we wanted to have a little bit of experience going into this. And then we just, I created a flyer, and, I also just told all my guy friends about it. And he told all his guy friends about it. And then we met. And the first meeting we had like, I want to say like over 10 guys were there.
Oh my God. Wow.
And a lot of my friends showed up, I think, to like support me, which like awesome. But I think a lot of them got there and were like, oh, this is cool. Like, I'm going to like, and some of my buddies always apologize. Like, sorry, man, I haven't been coming to the groups. I'm like, dude, do it for you. Do not go for me. Like, if you can't make it or you don't like it, like, that's fine, man. But then we kept meeting like that. It was just kind of traditional. Like, I didn't know how else to do it. I just put like chairs in a circle, like you see.
Perfect.
And we've been meeting now for about a year and a half. And I'd say like usually we get like 5 to 10 guys in all ages. That's one thing I'm really proud about. Anywhere from early 20s to into the 70s, which was really important to me. I wanted it to be all different views. It's just been incredible. It's easily like the coolest thing I've ever done. And
more than the van life?
100%. I mean, like, they're just different, right? But like this, like, when I first did it, I was just like so fired up. And every time I do it, I'm fired up. Because like, I'm like, this is awesome. Like, we're like doing something here. And I know, like, I definitely think some of those guys have like, I want to think benefited from it. I've benefited from it because it's a peer group. Like, I'm also a participant, and like, I've learned a ton. And I think it's really important. And like, I'd love to hear what you guys think of this as therapists. Like, therapy is good. It's great. But I think it's like, I'm all about like a holistic approach. I think peer to peer is super important too, because I think some people are like, well, this is a professional who I'm paying to talk to me. These guys just showed up tonight because they want to be here. Not that you guys don't want to be with your clients,
Yeah.
but it's just a different like dynamic.
Definitely.
And I think it's super important to have. And then, I wanted to do it for men because just traditionally, that's just not a space that men have. And I think also men are especially lonely, especially now. And this gives guys a sense of community. We have some guys in there that also like don't drink. And so this is a place where obviously we're not drinking and it's just a place outside of a bar where we don't like, let's get a beer. Like, we can just sit and talk. So it's been going great. And I'm going to continue doing it for as long as I'm in the county. Honestly, I don't see why not. If I can like plug a couple details about it.
Please do.
We meet at the Breck Library on Harris Street in the basement floor every other Monday at the Breck Library, 6:30 to 7:30. There's no like registration or anything. Just show up and talk. And, everything we talk about there is confidential. And so it's a place where we can talk and just keep that between us. And I've made like friends through that group, and like it's just a great way to like, especially if you're new to the county, like I'd love to have you there. And again, thank you to all the men who've been showing up there consistently. I love it, but it is also my thing, and I know it'd be way harder for me to show up if it wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
So these guys are like fully taking time out of their day to go do this, and like I have tons of respect for you. And it's so funny when we sit in that group and we're all talking about our shortcomings or like things we want to work on. One of the guys just said like, if you're in this group, like you're doing it, like you're working on yourself. So shout out to all those guys, and just really stoked that we were able to create that space in Summit County.
So cool.
For sure. Yeah. And in person too.
Yeah.
That's very important to me.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So cool.
Definitely.
This episode we think is going to come out the beginning of March, and Building Hope, who you work for, will be our monthly nonprofit. And so do you want to share a little bit about what Building Hope does? Because I really do think Building Hope saves people's lives.
Yeah.
But I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah. So Building Hope is we're a mental health nonprofit. We're based out of right here in Frisco. And kind of our mission is to make mental health care more accessible for Summit County residents. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but it's hard to live up here. And our suicide rates in mountain communities can be particularly high. And that's for a lot of different reasons. If you live here, I don't think you need to question any of those reasons. You know why, but one of them,
highest in the state. Just want to say, even for people that aren't in Summit County, it's the highest in our state is here. Yeah. So, and one of those things is lack of services, or lack of access to services. And so that's part of where we step in. So we're not a provider of care. We don't employ any therapists, but we're mainly like a referral service, kind of at like a very simple way of explaining it. So if someone is interested in starting therapy, but they're like, I don't know where to start with that process. Because like totally get it. Like you go on, you're like, okay, this is like 200 therapists. Like I have no idea where to start here. Call us, say that, and then you'll probably be talking to me if you speak English. If you speak Spanish, we do also have bilingual staff members that are awesome. So glad that we have them. But you'll probably be talking to me, and I'll just ask you a series of questions about like, are you insured? Or uninsured? What are you trying to work on in therapy? Just tell me more about maybe the challenges you're experiencing, and then I will send like a couple names just to whittle it down to like usually 3 people. And so it just makes it a little bit, I can do all like the research because I know the therapists up here, and I know I have more in-depth view of like what they specialize in and who I think would be a good fit for who. If you are uninsured or you have not good insurance and it's just, you're like, I can't pay for therapy. We also have the scholarship program. That's 12 sessions that are fully covered through Building Hope. And so if finances are a barrier, like we can help you with that. And I mean, especially for like seasonal workers up here, 12 sessions is like when they're going to be here. We do serve, that program is specific for people who live or work in Summit County. We just want to focus on Summit County. But, if you live in Fairplay or Georgetown, you commute in here to work, like, you're still eligible. And those navigation services I mentioned,
are for anybody. So I can only really, refer to in Summit County. But that's what we do. We're just trying to, make life a little bit easier on folks up here. And then also like running campaigns, marketing campaigns, just trying to shred that stigma that's around mental health and just make it, it's not mental health care, it's just healthcare.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. The other thing we do that I alluded to earlier that you were talking about, Jane, is we have a lot of programs to support providers.
Yeah.
We have an education fund for people going to grad school. That's amazing. We have credentialing funding if you want to get credentialed with insurance, because we want to incentivize providers to take insurance. We have funding programs for trainings. And so it's also about like making it easier on the therapists, the providers to provide this care. So that's what we do. Just speaking to Summit County, if you're struggling with something and you don't know where to start, first of all, you are not alone. We want you here. Like, you are loved and we are here to help you. So please call us. And it's literally as easy. It's what I always tell people, because I'm also super lazy. It's just like, you could call me and just say therapy and then hang up, and I would like call you back, and like that would get it going. Or you could like text me and say that word, or email me. Like you could even just call me and say nothing. I would call you back. So like that's just how easy it is. And I would love to help you out. And like I said, like, you're not alone. You just heard what I have experienced here, and like I'm sure, as you were alluding to as well, Jane, like a lot of people are also feeling the same way. So reach out to us.
I don't think we could end it on a better
note. We shouldn't even be talking, even though we are.
But, we have a hard time shutting up, which is why we have a podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah, the yapping. It was a good, I got all that stuff out. It felt so good.
Good.
Thanks, Dylan. This was such a good conversation.
Thank you guys for having me. I was so stoked when you guys invited me. I'm not going to lie, when I heard you guys had a podcast, I was like,
and here you are.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I was like, I really would love to do that. So I appreciate you guys giving me the space, and like also, like, if there's men out there who are like afraid to talk.
Yeah.
One of the concepts that I really love is being powerfully vulnerable. So like, if you're all about traditional masculine traits and you want to be strong, courageous, powerful, I'd say one of the most powerful things you can do is be vulnerable. And be honest with yourself and get help. There's this book that my mom gave me for Christmas. It's like this awesome book. I totally forget what it's called, but it has just a bunch of great one-liners in there. And one of them is someone asked someone else, they're like, what's the hardest thing you've ever said? And they said, help. So it takes a lot of courage for everybody. So like I said, please reach out. We want to help you guys.
Thank you, Dylan.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been listening to Are We Happy Yet? A Green Roof Studios production. This episode was recorded and produced by Hannah Buzzo and Jane Thatcher Hahn.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. Your support helps us reach more listeners. And for every rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we're donating to a charity connected to one of our guests. Check the show notes for more details on this month's featured charity.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.